or would like to review it again. Si necesita ayuda en español, por favor envíe un correo electrónico a studentassignment@wcpss.net y alguien se comunicará con usted mañana. As a reminder, today's session was prepared by the Office of Student Assignment. This session is designed to help you learn more about the student assignment planning process and Board Policy 4150, explore current enrollment and facility trends, and share your questions and feedback to help inform the development of the next district enrollment plan. As a reminder, today's session will focus primarily on the opening of the new Morrisville High School in 2027-28, along with other related adjustments to assignments needed in this area. And our session will last for no more than an hour and a half. We will begin with a presentation and conclude by responding to questions from today's session. We recognize that now and throughout the session, you may have questions for the presenter or the planning team. To capture your questions, we will be using the Q&A feature within Google Meet. To access this feature from a computer, please click on the grid icon in the toolbar on your screen. If you are using a mobile device, select the three dots first, then select the icon with the three shapes labeled Activities. You should then see a Q&A feature identified by a question mark icon. To ensure your questions are anonymous, our host and moderators will be monitoring the Q&A for questions and capturing them throughout this evening's session. Once you see that your question has been removed from the Q&A, that means that your question has been successfully captured by our moderators, and you do not need to resubmit your question. We will make every effort to respond to your questions toward the end of our session. In addition, we will use your questions to update the FAQ portion of our website. Si necesita ayuda en español, por favor envíe un correo electrónico a studentassignment@wcpss.net y alguien se comunicará con usted mañana. In addition, we are asking that you contribute to the larger community discussion related to enrollment planning via Thought Exchange. The Thought Exchange will remain open through April 30th. After it is closed, we will summarize the feedback received through the Thought Exchange and will share this summary on the assignment planning website. No one will be personally identified in the summary. You may be wondering why you were specifically invited to join us for this evening's session. There are many ways that the changes in school boundaries might impact families, and because of this, we invited families with current students in kindergarten through 8th grade living in the highlighted area of the map you see. For easier reference, we have indicated the location of the new Morrisville High with an orange arrow and circle. Your community may be impacted in a variety of ways. Your address might be assigned to a different school, particularly the new high school. Your base assigned elementary or middle school might change to improve cohort continuity. Your address might not have any assignment changes, yet your student's current school might have a reduced enrollment. This might lead to staffing changes at your current school as some teachers and staff move to a new or different school. Essentially, we want you to be aware of the planning efforts in your region so that you can best prepare for any of these potential changes. We are often asked if your feedback actually impacts the planning process. The short answer is yes. Feedback from previous planning cycles has led to an expansion of the stability rules so that more students are eligible to remain assigned to their current school following a reassignment, changing the enrollment strategy for new schools so that a mixture of new developments and existing communities are assigned to new schools, which slows the rate at which new schools fill up, and other improvements to the planning process. So, your input during this phase of the planning process truly informs the development of enrollment plans. All of the information we will share during this evening's session, along with other tools and resources to help you better understand the planning process, can be found on our district website. So before I turn things over to our presenter, I would like to remind everyone that we will be using the Q&A feature in Google Meet to capture your questions throughout this session. To access this feature from a computer, please click on the grid in the toolbar on your screen. If you are using a mobile device, select the three dots first, then select the icon with the three shapes. You should then see a Q&A feature identified by a question mark icon. To ensure your questions are anonymous, our host and moderators will be monitoring the Q&A for questions and capturing them throughout this evening's session. Once you see that your question has been removed from the Q&A, that means your question has been successfully captured by our moderators and you do not need to resubmit your question. We will make every effort to respond to your questions toward the end of our session. In addition, we will use your questions to update the FAQ portion of our website. Si necesita ayuda en español, por favor envíe un correo electrónico a studentassignment@wcpss.net y alguien se comunicará con usted mañana. And now I will turn things over to our presenter, Susan Pulliam.
Thank you, Dr. Chansey, for your welcome and for all of the great information you've already shared about how we're going to work through today's presentation. And we'll check back in with you later when we get to the Q&A portion of today's event. Just again, thank you all for joining us this evening, and I am so grateful for the opportunity to share with you information about our planning process and provide an opportunity, most importantly, for you to ask questions and allow us to respond to those questions, as well as gather your feedback that will be pertinent to the development of this year's enrollment plan. Before we get started, let's just talk about the policy that governs the assignment planning process, and that's Board Policy 4150. It directs staff to balance, to the extent practicable or reasonable, the goals and factors identified by four main pillars: student achievement, proximity, stability, and operational efficiency. Each of these pillars does have a specific definition within policy. And just to help make sure everyone understands what that policy is and how it guides staff to develop assignment plans, we're going to take a brief moment to watch a short video that helps to further explain this policy, and then we'll come back together.
Understanding student assignment. It's no secret that our school district is growing, and it's growing fast. That means each year we need to address overcrowded schools and often need to open new schools to keep up with this growth. To state the obvious, we may have to reduce the enrollment at an existing school or fill new schools with students. This is done through the annual student assignment process. To best understand when and where new growth is coming in our district, we conduct an annual enrollment forecast. This forecast helps us look ahead up to 10 years and project enrollment growth throughout the district. This information helps us update our capital improvement plan and to make more informed decisions related to school assignments. Each year, some students are assigned to one of our new schools or reassigned to an existing school. This ensures we have balanced school populations across the district. We know families love their schools and that student assignment decisions can be worrisome. That's why we want to be completely transparent in how we make them. Our school board has established 4 pillars that guide each and every student assignment decision. Here's what they mean and how they work together. Student achievement. We want all of our schools to provide the best academic opportunities for our students. This pillar compels us to think about whether a student assignment plan can help reduce high concentrations of poverty or low-performing students at some of our schools. Stability. Essentially, we try to keep as many children at their current school through the exit grade as possible. When reassignments are necessary, we provide the opportunity for some students to submit a stability transfer request and stay at their current school through the exit grade. Operational efficiency. This pillar is about making sure all of our schools and transportation resources are at their best use. Overcrowded schools are a problem. Classrooms packed with too many students are one thing. But then there are the endless carpool lines, bathroom facilities that can't comfortably accommodate everyone, and having to start lunch when most people are still working on breakfast. On the flip side, having under-enrolled schools is an inefficient use of public resources, particularly when there are crowded schools nearby. Proximity. Okay, this one can be a little tricky. In a perfect world, houses would be built in neat little rows on a predictable timeline and at a slow and steady rate. As it is, we live in an imperfect world where lots and lots of homes pop up in one area, while growth is slight or non-existent in others. For this reason, it is impossible to send every child to their most proximate school unless we want some of our schools bursting at the seams while others are half empty. That said, this pillar states that we will send students to schools within a reasonable distance. Often, the difference between the most proximate school and the next most proximate school is no more than a couple of miles. Please remember that we must consider all 4 of these pillars when making assignment decisions. There is no priority among the 4 that applies in every situation. It's a balancing act that ultimately helps us come up with the best possible plan for everyone. Thank you for working with us to ensure our school system continues to serve all students well.
So I hope that information was helpful for you. If you're interested, that video is also linked on our website. In addition to the guidance that's provided by Board Policy 4150, we follow an annual planning cycle that has 6 main steps. For the 27-28 school year, we've already completed the first 3 steps in this cycle, and we're actively in step 4. Please notice that the cycle for 1 year's plan, you'll see that March is listed here and May, and we're in March now. So that what you're noticing is that the plans overlap each other. It's a continuous process for continual evaluation and improvement. And in this area in particular, you may be aware that we're actively working on step 6 of last year's plan with respect to calendars and elementary schools in the region. But we've had separate conversations about those. But essentially, we're working to develop and implement plans that support the operation of all of our schools by following and continuously evaluating through these 6 steps. So let's just take a moment to walk through these steps, and I do mean a moment, to make sure that everyone has a full understanding of all the work that's led up to the point where we're ready to start talking about actually drawing an attendance area for a school. So the first step is the development of the annual enrollment forecast. You might have heard that mentioned in the video. That forecast provides not just a 1-year projection, but also a 10-year projection for growth in the district. And even though the enrollment forecast does provide that 10-year projection, we still update it annually to make sure that we can account for any changes in residential development patterns, home sales, birth rates, and other demographic factors that influence student enrollment numbers in our district. The forecast is developed in 3 phases. We begin by getting our school data together for our current school year. Then we work with our partners and demographers in the community to gather and assess additional data, particularly things related to market share. We also look at other demographic trends like residential sales, even employment patterns, and of course, birth rates. And then, of course, we're looking to then blend all of that with an analysis looking at other relevant or relative information at the local, national, and of course, state level. So this is just an example of one of the pieces of demographic information that we look at each year, and it's looking at birth rates. And what we essentially do is say that that yellow line represents birth rates 5 years prior. So back in 2021, the number that you see there represents a little over 12,500 students were born in Wake County hospitals. And by the beginning of the 25-26 year, this many came in and registered as kindergartners in Wake County Public School System. As you can see, it's a relatively predictable trend, with the exception, of course, of the 2020 time period. And that is a very helpful information for us to better understand how birth rates are impacting enrollments for us. And there's many other factors, but that's just an example of one. Here you can see what the most recent enrollment forecast shows, and it is predicting a more gradual growth rate. You'll see it's this lower line here, a more gradual growth rate in the out years than our previous forecast. This type of change is the exact reason why we update the forecast annually. By looking at the data and trends on an annual basis, we're able to account for any changes in residential development patterns, home sales, birth rates, all those things we've talked about already that can impact the forecast. And so we can tell by the last couple of years' trends that while we're still a growing county and we're still a location that lots of employers are coming to, we're not growing nearly as fast as maybe we originally projected, but still growth. So what this map then helps us to do is to understand not just how many students we're going to have in the district, but where those new growth students are going to be located, and where throughout the district we might need to be evaluating if we need additional seats or if we need to make adjustments to our assignment plans. As you review the map, you'll notice that most of the arrows showing projected enrollment increases are much larger than the ones that are showing decreases. So that means basically that the areas with the red, smaller arrows that are pointing in the downward direction are reflecting stabilization, not so much loss of student enrollment, but just stabilizing of the growth, not having such a high growth rate. Where you see the larger blue arrows, that lets you know that we're going to have growth that exceeds that stabilization, which then turns into more students over time. It's also important to note that the growth is not happening evenly across the district, kind of like the video talked about. Some areas are projected to see significant increases over the next 5 to 10 years, while others are expected to remain relatively stable. So let's zoom in and look at your area of the district. As you can see, for much of this region, growth is slowing, and school enrollments for some schools in this area are beginning to stabilize for the first time in a very long time, as noted by those small red arrows that we discussed earlier. However, there are a few areas where growth is still projected, and so those are noted by those blue arrows. So, you're still seeing some projected growth in the region, and we need to take that into consideration as we're developing plans for the area. We will need to also look not only at Morrisville High School, but think about this as we work to rebalance enrollments at elementary and middle schools to develop those cohort feeder patterns into the high school. We've learned from several of our experiences in the past that, if we're going to develop an attendance area for the high school, let's make sure that the group of students coming into the high school are following a similar path from elementary to middle to high, so they'll know their friends and cohort peers as they move into the high school space. In case you're just now joining us, I think a few people joined in the last couple of minutes. We're going to be using the Q&A feature in Google Meet to capture your questions and to ensure that your questions are anonymous. Our host and moderators will be monitoring the Q&A. When you see that your question has been removed from the Q&A feature, that lets you know that one of them has successfully captured the question, and we'll get to it later in tonight's session. All right, so the second step in the process, that 6-step cycle that we were talking about, is that reviewing that 1-year growth. Let's look at the coming school year and what do we already know about school utilization across the district. So if you're looking at the elementary school levels, this is for next school year for 26-27. This is just a quick look at the district across the whole district based on that annual forecast. For context, the darker orange or red triangles are indicating elementary schools that are projected to be at or above 110% crowding for the next school year. So you can see we still have quite a few of those across the district. As we take a closer look at your region, you'll notice a mixture of those crowding rates. As you may know, the district is currently reviewing whether some of the multi-track year-round elementary schools, particularly in this area, could benefit from a calendar change since they're no longer at full capacity. However, another approach, and has been recommended by some community members, might be to look at relieving some of the capped schools that are surrounding those schools with lower enrollment. And perhaps we could maintain the multi-track calendar while expanding the base for these schools. So there's lots of options we can look at, but noticing that we have some available capacity sort of in this space, but then we've got overcrowded or capped schools really super close to that region, is something to keep in mind. And now we're looking at the middle schools across the district. So as you can see, very similar. We're using circles to represent the locations of the middle schools on this map. Again, the darker the orange or red, the more overcrowded the school. And as you can see at the middle school level, we've done a pretty good job with our capital improvement plan of getting enough middle schools opened up that for the most part, we have enough seats at the middle school level, with the exception of your region. As you know, Alston Ridge Middle is very full. Mills Park is extremely full and has been capped for over 10 years. So the Parkside Middle site that's coming in the future will be a welcome relief to this region. It won't open probably until closer to 2030, so we won't have specific recommendations for that school in the upcoming plan, but we will keep that in mind as we're developing the attendance area for the new high school. And then we can look at the high schools. So again, you see the projected crowding at high schools across the district, and they're being represented by squares. And here, as we look at the region, you can see the location of Morrisville High School. One thing I want to draw your attention to, I know it looks like Panther Creek and Green Hope are quote unquote just at 100%, but if you're from this region, you may know they have many, many, many trailers on both of their campuses. So that crowding reflects full use of all of those trailers as well. So the high school at Morrisville site will be a very welcome addition of permanent capacity in the region so that we can reduce our need to rely on those trailers for much longer. The next step in the process, step 3, is then to say, okay, we know what our enrollment forecast is looking like. We're kind of taking stock of what our projected crowding for the upcoming school year is. What's going on with our capital improvement plan or our CIP? So let's look a little closer. So in this area, obviously, we're here to talk about Morrisville High School. I just do want to pause before we get too much further and let note there's asterisks on everything. So every particular construction project that we have, this is the ideal schedule, the preferred schedule. And for those of you that are in this area and maybe have been with us as we've been trying to talk about Parkside Middle, but then had to put it on pause, that construction schedule obviously got delayed significantly. So any project could potentially delay based on construction schedules, based on materials, anything like that. But at this point, we are getting all signs are a go that Morrisville High School will be ready for the 27-28 school year. In fact, it's currently being used as swing space for the Wake Early College of Information Biotechnology while they wait for the permanent construction of their final destination home at the Parkside Middle site. So we know that that school's on target. And so this will be the only school that we're opening in 27-28. Just to give you a quick view of where all the schools are, the school circled here in green, that's Hilltop Needmore Elementary. It's opening in 26-27, already has an improved enrollment plan. We'll be focusing our efforts in the 27-28 enrollment plan on developing an attendance area for Morrisville High School. And then in the out years, these are the schools that have already been identified for new school construction. What you may notice is that, candidly, for Wake County, this is not very many new schools coming. We are switching our focus to really emphasize renovations. And you'll see that our renovation list for the first time in a while is significantly longer than our new school site list. And I've highlighted for you 2 schools in your area that are scheduled to have renovation projects, major renovation projects in the coming years. So Briarcliff Elementary and Cary High School will both get major renovations in the next several years. It is possible that those renovations could also increase capacity at either of these sites. So the planning team will continue to monitor those projects. And if that's the case, may also bring recommendations to the board to perhaps expand the attendance areas of the schools if they're able to serve more students. To give you an idea of the distribution of the renovation projects across the district, I just wanted to share this map with you. Again, the school circled in green represents a school that will be completed with its renovation project for 26-27. And those circled in orange on this map are projects that'll be completed in the 27-28 school year. So all the other projects are yet to finish. Some haven't even started, but they're on the plan to begin work within the 7-year CIP timeline. Which then brings us to why we're all together today. So we know some information, we have our facts and figures. Now it's time to engage the public and make sure we understand the unique experiences and unique perspectives of members of the community before we come to the board with a draft plan. This is a relatively new part of our process. In years past, we would present a draft enrollment plan in September to the board and then begin the public engagement process. So we have shifted this process over the last several years to work to gain feedback from the community early. In fact, this session, the reason it exists is specifically in response to feedback we had last year. Last year, we had an in-person session at Panther Creek to support starting to learn a little bit more about what your community needs for the development of the Morrisville High School attendance area. And we heard feedback, well, not all of us could go to the in-person session. Could there not have been a virtual option? So this year we specifically added in the virtual option so that we could have two methods for families like yours to participate in this discussion. So we're thankful that you're here with us tonight and taking advantage of this opportunity. All of the information we're sharing with you and any information that we learn along the way will get posted to our assignment planning site. We will update it this time of year. We'll update it probably monthly. As we get closer to September, it'll be a little bit more like weekly. So just bookmark this website and continue to visit it throughout the planning process to get updates on where we are with the planning process, to get more information like frequently asked questions as we update that information, as well as any specific ways that you can engage in the discussion as we continue forward in the planning process. As part of this process, we will also take time to review the goals of the enrollment plan with the Board of Education. That's scheduled for May. So if you'd like to tune in, that'll be their May 5th work session, and that information will also be posted to our site. The next step in the process, which we've recently completed for last year's planning cycle, is to look at which schools might benefit from or need to have a cap maintained or could have a cap removed. So in this last cycle, we were able to remove caps from 5 schools, but we did have to add a cap to 1 school. But that ratio is good. We took off 5 and only added 1. As a district, we're working really hard to reduce the total number of schools that are capped, because we do realize the pressure that puts not only on the schools, but on the families. You move into an area and you can't even go to school with the student that maybe lives next door to you because you're newer in the neighborhood. And so we're working to try to rebalance our enrollment as best we can and take advantage of new capacity when it comes online so that we can do that. You'll know in this region in particular, we were finally able to get the cap off of Alston Ridge Elementary as well as Parkside Elementary this past year. They're currently capped for the rest of this year, but their cap will come off effective July 1. And here you see the remaining schools in this area. Some of it dips a little bit deeper into Cary, but you'll see the schools in this area, and you still have several in this region that are maintaining caps and capping students out. The last step in the process then is to look at what other schools might still benefit from some other type of support from a utilization perspective. So do we have a school that might need to go to multi-track year round to expand its capacity? Next year in the eastern part of our county, Lake Myra Elementary will go from track 4 to multi-track because its growth has finally picked up and it needs to support that enrollment growth. In other areas, we don't have any other changes happening for 26, 27. For 27, 28, there are some schools in the northern part of the district that are going from multi-track to single track 4 because they no longer need all of the extra capacity that multi-track provides. So those would be examples of types of changes that might come out of recommendations from this step. We won't talk much about this step tonight, but know that any decisions that are made relative to calendar adjustments will also be taken into consideration as we finalize suggestions for the 27-28 enrollment plan. Again, I'll say it a couple of times. Anything that we're talking about tonight or any information that you're looking for any of these topics can be found on the assignment planning page. It's listed in the 6 steps. So if you're interested in the calendar conversions conversation, you can go to this site and go to step 6 and you'll find that information. If you're interested in the forecast information that I talked about at the beginning, you can go to step 1 and you'll see all the links to the report, the presentation, all of that. So if you're interested in any of the details on any of these steps, you can get more information by visiting our assignment planning site. I think I'm ready to turn things back over to Eric so that I can get a drink of water and we can start preparing to answer questions. Am I right? I think I did. I did the first part as fast as I possibly could.
It is your show, Mrs. Pulliam.
All right. Why don't you give everybody an update on what we're going to do after this session so that they know what comes after. I'll get a drink of water and then we'll get ready for our Q&A.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Before we begin responding to your questions, I want to review where we are in the planning process and highlight what's coming up next. First, we encourage you to continue to contribute to the district-wide thought exchange. That's going to remain open through the end of April. We welcome you to bookmark our assignment planning website and visit it regularly for updated information and to find ways to participate in future engagement activities. And finally, we recommend that you tune into board work sessions over the next few months so that you can hear updates on the public engagement process and to review the initial draft of the 27-28 assignment plan or enrollment plan. I know we've reviewed a lot of information and would like to address as many of your questions as possible. Please take a few moments and post any questions or comments using the Q&A feature. As you are posting questions, we will review questions that were submitted during the session and start with those. All right. Are you ready, Mrs. Pulliam?
I am.
Okay. If my child is in Panther Creek, but we are rezoned to Morrisville High, will we be given a choice to stay at Panther Creek?
There's a lot of ways to answer this question, so I'll answer them every way. If your student is going to be a rising 9th or 10th grader the year that Morrisville High School opens, and they're in the assignment area to be assigned to the school, they will be reassigned. If they do not have an older sibling that will be remaining at Panther Creek, then most likely they won't be eligible to return to Panther Creek. There are a handful of exceptions that the board sometimes will make, but they're not very many. If, however, your student is currently a 9th or a 10th grader, by the time the school opens, they'll be an 11th or a 12th grader. Those students will not be reassigned. One thing the board has done, and I think it's been for quite some time now, to support continuity of programming for juniors and seniors, is to only open the school with 9th and 10th grade. So students who would be eligible to remain at their current school if their address is reassigned would be automatically all rising 11th and 12th graders for the 27-28 school year and beyond. They would get to stay at their current school and finish out at their current school. And the only way that a 9th or 10th grader that year in 27-28 would be allowed to remain would be if they had an older sibling at the school, or if they met one of the small handful of exceptions that the board can sometimes make during a particular planning cycle.
If my student has a transfer, will that assignment be affected if we are rezoned to Morrisville High?
It should not be. Transfers are generally handled through a separate assignment process called the transfer application process. Once a transfer is approved, it's generally valid through the end of the grade span of that particular school. So in general, no, a student who's officially on transfer should not be impacted by a reassignment. And I'm going to pause. I noticed one or two parents were trying to use the raise the hand feature. We're not using the raise the hand feature tonight. We're using the Q&A feature. So if you've got a question, please just type it into that Q&A feature, and our host and our moderators at this point will grab that question and make sure we address it before we close tonight.
Will you be taking direct feedback from communities that are split?
Share that information, please. If you can type any of that information into the Q&A feature here, or use any of the other captures that capture tools that we're using, like the Thought Exchange. I know in years past we've had communities in the Thought Exchange. Our community is such, name the community, and we are split into different schools and would like to be aligned. And so if that's what you're asking, please share that information. Yes, and the planning team will absolutely be happy to evaluate that. We also have a lot of geospatial data that's available to us. So we're gotten better and better technology to help us tell which communities are, an intact neighborhood, a subdivision, if there's multiple phases to a subdivision. And one thing that we heard from the community over the last several years is we understand that sometimes there are massive subdivisions that maybe can't fit in a single school, but could you at least try to reduce the number of times our subdivision is, split, so that maybe we're not going to 3 or 4 or 5 schools, maybe we're going to 2 schools or something like that. So that feedback the planning team has already taken into deep consideration and is thinking through, particularly with the development of the attendance area for Morrisville High School as well.
As it particularly relates to the last question,
Mhm.
yes, the family is in Preston. Community is split among 3 elementary schools,
Oh.
3 middle, and now potentially 2 high schools.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I'm sure the planning team is already aware of that, but having this specific example will be great to lift up. We don't want to continue to do that if we can avoid it.
Will there be tentative maps for the zoning of the school and then the subsequent rezonings for Panther Creek, Green Hope, and Green Level?
Yes, they, however, won't be available probably till September, till the September launch with the school board. Right now, we're tentatively scheduled to present at the work session on September 2nd. So that would be the first time the maps would be publicly available. And then they would be available from then until November while the board is considering and reviewing and determining if any adjustments need to be made.
If my student starts a new high school in 26, 27, will that student, so ninth grade, be given the option? What will be the stability rules or proposed stability rules around the opening of this school?
I'm going to presume they'll be the same that we used for the opening of Felton Grove High School recently, which was if the student is a rising ninth or 10th grader the year that the school opens and doesn't have an older sibling who would be a rising 11th or 12th grader, they would automatically be assigned to the new school. So yes, the student who spends ninth grade at one school would potentially then spend 10th, 11th, and 12th at the new school. And usually the board is pretty conservative and adhering to those stability rules, partly because candidly, we have to have enough students at the school to support the teachers to make sure we can have high quality academic programming at the school. And if we only open with ninth grade, there are a lot of disadvantages for the students because you can't offer quite the number of courses. The students would be very disadvantaged if we open the school with only ninth grade. So opening with ninth and 10th seems to be the best compromise. It leaves 11th and 12th graders at their current school, not impacted at all. One thing the board has added recently is that the younger siblings could join that older sibling and then stay through 12th grade. That's relatively new based on community feedback. It used to be, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, they could only stay until the older sibling graduated and then they had to go to the new school after that. I
You
think
are
that's
correct.
correct. Yeah. So we are trying to find as many compromises as we can while making sure there's a sufficient number of students at the new school to support all the programming and make sure that we can get the proper number of teachers to have the advanced courses to make sure that there's enough staff to support, all the different Englishes and maths that ninth and 10th graders might need.
There are a number of questions that have been asked that say basically, please show the map. We are early enough on. There's
There
not a
isn't
map
one.
yet. Is that correct?
Correct. There's
Okay.
no map yet. And that's the shift that we've done, and that's why this might feel a little bit new. Historically, we wouldn't start doing public engagement until after we released the first map. And now we've started trying to get the feedback before we release the first map to make sure that we're taking as much community feedback into consideration as the map is developed. And then once the draft is released in September, there'll be an opportunity from September till middle October to review and provide feedback. Any adjustments that should be recommended would be brought forward to the board in October, and then they would look at it one last month. And then by November, any final adjustments would be made and they'd be ready to approve the plan. So yes, there are no maps. No maps exist.
Will current fragmentation of elementary and middle schools be considered when drawing the reassignment area?
Yes, I think you mentioned that in the opening comments about, why are you here? It's because we want to look at that type of information and see if there's not a way that we can take advantage of the fact that we're opening a new high school to maybe realign some elementary and middle cohorts so that you can have a less fragmentation. I know in this particular area, because it was growing so fast for so long, there are a lot of non-contiguous base attendance areas. There are some satellite areas that are going, 2 and 3 schools away because of how fast the area was growing. Yes, we do intend to look at elementary assignments. Middle school assignments are going to be a little tricky since Parkside Middle isn't opening until a little bit later. We don't want to move students twice, if you will. So we'll be very, very thoughtful about any middle school recommendations because we certainly want to reassign a middle school area, and then when Parkside opens, reassign it again. We do want to avoid that if we can.
Will proximity to the new school versus currently assigned schools be considered?
If I understand the question correctly, if I live super close to Morrisville High School, does that increase the chances, the likelihood that I would be assigned to Morrisville High School? Yes, anytime we can take advantage of assigning areas right around the school, we want to do that. We want to acknowledge and honor that proximity pillar. Um, we also then just have to make sure that we don't do it in such a way that it overly reduces one particular high school too much, right? So there might be some rebalancing in the area as well, but it's a very thoughtful question to ask. But yes, we certainly want to try to assign the students closest to the school and right now where it's located, it is far enough away from, let's say, Panther Creek and Green Hope that it'd probably be pretty clear which of the two schools is closest.
Same question for the full middle schools. Will the school board consider pulling full middle schools in close proximity to the high school rather than multiple middle schools?
Sure. So ideally, I hear this a lot, especially from people who've moved into the district from other areas. You might have heard the term maybe of an assignment pyramid. That's what some districts call it, or a feeder pattern. Um, there are some districts that are so small, they only have 6 or 7 schools. And so the 2 or 3 elementary schools go to 2 middle schools, and then they all feed into one high school. And it's a perfect little sort of package of schools. Um, we have not historically been able to 100% pull that off because as a county system with over 200 schools, the math doesn't always work. However, we can do better. And so, yes, the planning team has really made that a priority. If you paid attention to any of the assignment recommendations in the 26-27 plan, they focused expressly on that in the Holly Springs community, trying as hard as possible, wherever practical, to take whole schools together to the next level, except for when the math doesn't work. Like if the elementary school is bigger than the middle school, or if the middle school's too big for the high school, something like that, we might have to cut them and split them. But we're trying to have less splits. So yes, it's a long way of saying yes, 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 yes. We want to try to do that.
Um, this specifically revolves around boundaries for certain schools, but when do you anticipate timeline-wise that the enrollment plan will share information about newly potentially established boundaries for different schools? What is the timeline
Sure.
that you're looking at?
So for 27-28, any of those types of recommendations would come in that September timeframe that we talked about earlier. So roughly September 2nd, first week of September. And at that point, the maps would first be shared with the board in a work session. And then immediately following, we would have some planned information sessions. And we'll even have an open house later in September so that families can come ask. There's going to be some questions. I haven't heard any yet, Eric, but I've got to imagine there's academic questions and programming questions, athletics questions. That's not really our germane, but our domain, I should say, but we do know who can answer those questions, and we'll gather all of that staff together so that we'll try to get some of the FAQs answered ahead of time. Some of them we actually already know the answer to because we just opened a high school this past year. But we'll have all those opportunities for you to see the maps, ask questions, participate in information sessions, kind of like this type of a format, as well as having the online forums. And then as we get closer to November, when it becomes sort of the board is now saying, okay, we're now trying to make final decisions. They'll even host their own personal public hearing, which will be a formal public hearing announced. And it's usually in late October. So there'll be lots of opportunities for people to engage with the maps and ask questions about them as well.
Will Panther Creek become uncapped with Morrisville High School opening?
One can only hope. A perfect example, similar situation. I hate to keep bringing it up, but we opened up Felton Grove High School this year with 9th and 10th graders. It took a very significant portion of the Apex Friendship High School attendance area as part of its opening area. However, because Apex Friendship is still serving all of those 11th and 12th graders, the cap remained in place for this year and will probably remain in place for at least another year or two until those cohorts all age out. And then the fingers crossed, we should be able to try to start working toward removing that cap. So yes, the goal is to get to a point where Panther Creek would no longer need to be capped. It just might take a couple of years to fully get to that stage where that's possible.
Any idea what middle schools are going to feed into Morrisville High?
It's hard to say at this point. I mean, we can look at, I'm going to see if I can pull one of the maps up that show where the middle school, I think we had that middle school crowding map. So the high school site is, roughly here. So I would think, but because Parkside Middle hasn't opened up, right, that so that it might just be a little bit too early, but I would certainly think that any of the middle schools kind of in this area might potentially be expecting that they would be aligned to Morrisville. But I don't keep in mind Morrisville High School is a little bit smaller than our more of our high schools. It's going to be about an 1,800 student capacity roughly, as compared to, let's say, a 2,200 capacity high school. So we will have to be thoughtful about how many students from one middle school will fit, and will that be enough to fill the school, or would we need to maybe take a portion of two middle schools or something like that? So yeah, we will work really, really hard to keep the splits to a minimum. But I would say that the schools roughly, and any students kind of living in this general area, are definitely prime targets just because of their proximity to the campus.
My student's going to be an eighth grader at Mills Park in 27-28. If she's reassigned for cohort reasons, can she stay at Mills Park?
Can you ask that again? I'm not sure that I track.
My student will be an eighth grader at Mills Park in 27-28. If she's reassigned,
okay. Because of the cohort feeder patterns.
Yep.
Historically, what the board has done, even this past year with some reassignments out of the school, is that if the student is already attending the school, we've gotten the board to kind of go with, as long as it's not a new school. So you're saying because of the cohort reassignments, they go from Mills Park to a different middle school, but not a new middle school. Yeah, there would be a high likelihood that the board would allow us to maintain the stability rules we've been using for the past several years, which is that, yes, they'd be able to stay. They might lose transportation as the bus routes for that area are aligned to whatever the newly assigned school are, but yes, they'd be able to stay.
The growth seems to be impacting the schools in what is now called West Cary. Our neighborhood goes to Cary High. It seems that this neighborhood probably is, by itself. Are we really involved in this mix if we're assigned to Cary High?
So Cary High, I don't think we have it here, but Cary High does have a little bit of an arm of its attendance area that kind of goes up this corridor. So there's always a possibility that that northwestern edge of Cary High is close enough to this Morrisville space that they could potentially be impacted. But the core of Cary, close to Cary High, is most likely not going to be impacted. But there's a chance. So it's kind of like, if I live down here, am I going to be assigned to Morrisville High School? No, you're not going to be assigned to Morrisville High School. But the school you're at might get smaller. Right. That's kind of why we've invited as many people as we have. In fact, let me go back to that impact area map. That might be probably the better question to answer. Right. So people that are kind of on this edge of the impact map, they're less likely to be expecting an assignment change. However, your school might get smaller, or your enrollment might get smaller, or your favorite teacher might take an assignment at the new school. So there are impacts you can have that, while they're less severe, are still impactful to your students' experience. And we just wanted you to be aware. So I would definitely argue that if you're kind of, the farther along the edge of this map that you are, the closer you are to that external boundary, the less likely you'd be considered for assignment to the school. But your school assignment, the school that you're assigned to, might see changes in its enrollment. And that's why you're here.
Instead of asking about the specific school in this question, I'm going to ask a more global question.
Sure.
How do we petition to remain at our previously assigned high school in the event that we are reassigned? Or it's two-parter. Mm-hmm. How do we get you not to reassign us? And in the event that we are, how do we ask?
Sure. So again, in the thought exchange now, the thought exchange is open now. If you're in a particular community and you kind of want to name your subdivision or your cross streets, please do not put your personal address. Please don't do that. We don't want you to do anything that's confidential to your family. But if you want to say something along that's a little bit more anonymous, the blah, blah, blah neighborhood, or neighborhoods at the blah, blah, blah intersection. If you want to put something like that in there, say would really like to remain assigned to our current schools, put that in there. Let the planning team see that and see that information. And so that could be step one, right? And then step two, let's say, regardless, despite your best efforts, that area has been put into the maps that are released in September. Then you've got that opportunity from September to October to again petition to maybe not have your area included in the map. But if it just gets to the point where it, as a whole, it makes sense for this neighborhood to be assigned to the school, then you would have the transfer processes available to you. If you're eligible under the stability rules, you'll get special invitations to participate in that. Those usually happen in December. That way you get your final just, information on that before you, break for the winter break. If you're not in that bucket where you're eligible under the stability provisions, you can always use the hardship transfer process. That's precisely what it's for, to talk about your unique perspective for your family or for your student. And the board will, the staff will review those, but likely the board would have to review those since it does involve a new school assignment. So step one, tell us in the thought exchange now. Step two, if it ends up being in the map anyway, make sure you share that information in the forums that we use in September and October. And then step three, if it ultimately is part of the map, then you can use those transfer processes to ask for a change.
In the last few minutes, a handful of folks have raised hands, and just a reminder, we are not using that feature. We're using the Q&A feature. So please make sure to use the Q&A feature, because this also documents the questions instead of us answering something off the cuff that maybe isn't documented properly for the purpose of review in the entire process. All right. Oldest child will be an 11th grader at Green Hope in 27-28. Youngest will be in 8th grade. So then oldest moves to 12th, youngest moves to 9th. Is my rising 9th grader then eligible to attend Green Hope with the 12th grade student?
Yes. The difference here is that if the younger student, the rising 9th grader, isn't coming in specifically the year that the plan takes place, which is 27-28, you won't be able to use a stability transfer window. That only applies to students impacted for the 27-28 year. However, yes, in the 28, when you're getting ready for the 28-29 year, you would use the regular official hardship transfer period, put your request in. Say I'm a sibling trying to match my older student, and our normal assignment policies will allow rising 9th, rising 6th, and rising kindergarten students to join their older siblings at whatever school they're assigned to. That's a normal assignment policy. So yes, your student would be able to do it. You would just use the regular transfer period to ask for it.
Now, obviously, with this area, lots of capping questions.
Okay.
And I'm going to try to get the nuance in this one.
Okay.
Do you anticipate being able to finally lift the cap on Mills Park Middle when Parkside Middle opens?
Eventually, yes. And I say it's similar to the question about Panther Creek. Yes, the plan is to finally lift the cap at Mills Park Middle. We just have to wait until there's enough students who have taken the new assignment. All of the stability transfers have aged out, and the school is finally at a small enough size that it can just, manage its base attendance area. But yes, that would be the plan. Fingers crossed.
Okay, now, very similar to the previous rising senior, rising 9th grader.
Okay.
Yes, my 9th grader is already there. 12th grader leaves. Does the 9th grader rising into 10th get to stay?
Oh, thank you for asking that clarifying question. Yes, that's the change in the last couple of years. The board has allowed us to implement stability rules that would make that 9th grader a permanent transfer, as long as you're a resident of Wake County. Don't go move into Durham or anything, right? But as long as you're a resident of Wake County, your student would have what's called a transfer status through the end of 12th grade. They won't have transportation, of course, but they can stay. That gives you the flexibility if that works for your we've had some families say, hey, we're going to do it for the 9th and 12th grade when they're together because of the ride sharing and just having all of our family at one school. But when the student rises into 10th grade, we're going to ask them what they'd like to do. And maybe you want to go to the new school at that point. Maybe some friends have gone over there. Maybe you've heard wonderful things about their band program or whatever it is. You then would have the choice to put in a request to undo the transfer, but you would not have to ask to stay at Green Hope or Panther Creek or what other school is being impacted. You would have that transfer through the 12th grade for that younger student. Thank you for lifting up that question.
Will you be assigning kids from Green Level High to Morrisville High since Green Level is the most overcrowded high school with the most projected growth?
I can't say no because obviously no maps have been drawn yet. But hearing what we've heard from our communities, particularly this area, we are sensitive to the very non-contiguous attendance areas for some of your elementary and middle base attendance areas. Areas that are right around, let's say Hortons Creek, that are going to Salem. We're very sensitive to this long-standing sort of complication that this region has had to manage because of how fast everything happened and how long it's taken us to get to the point where we have the new high school and all of that. So, if we can, we will work to have contiguous attendance areas wherever possible. Yes, green level probably needs some relief, but it may be a bit of a domino impact. So, again, I'll go back to our Apex area. Apex High started receiving attendance areas from Apex Friendship to start relieving Apex Friendship. And then it started giving attendance areas to Green Hope to get some relief, but also to prepare Green Hope for when Morrisville High opened. So we've been doing some domino cascading type assignment changes to try to provide the relief in a way that at least geographically feels a little bit sensible. Um, Please keep in mind, I know we've been talking about Morrisville High School. If your student is impacted by that type of reassignment, so let's just fictionally say some areas from Green Level might get assigned into Panther Creek, right? As Panther Creek loses some to Morrisville High School. Let's just say that happens. If that were to happen, because that's an existing high school to an existing high school, every student at any grade that's already in the school would be allowed to stay. The restrictions wouldn't be as severe. It wouldn't just be the 11th and 12th graders. It's only Morrisville High School because it's a new school and it needs a population to get started that would have the more restricted rules.
If and I'm trying to make a, I'm trying to bring a question out of this. Um, when maps are presented in September, when
Mhm.
additional assignment information and enrollment plan is suggested in September, if parents have further concerns,
Mhm.
will the board make further changes?
Yes, we call it an initial draft so that we can release it. And I will say, we've I mentioned earlier, we've gotten a lot better with our technology and our data resources. And by having all of this public engagement, we started these conversations 2 years ago. We've been hearing a lot from the community about what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what's walkable, what's not walkable. That's those types of perspectives, what our sibling priorities should be. So we take all of that information into consideration. And so that initial draft is usually pretty robust, right? It's a pretty good first draft because we have so much more data available to us than we did, let's say, 20 years ago. However, things can happen, things can be overlooked, things can be not understood because of unique perspectives. So between September and October, we take a whole lot of additional feedback. We have a lot more information sessions. I mentioned the open house. And then we come back to the board in October and say, okay, we heard all of this information. Here are the things that we really can't change. Here are some things we're recommending a change for. And so you'll see those adjustments in the plan. So every year between September and October, there's some type of adjustment that's made. It is very rare for it to get from September to November with no changes. Very, very rare.
I'm not sure how to answer this. My seventh grader will be in Alston Ridge during 27-28. Will there be any school transfer for my student? I think, will this student be affected? And again, folks, it would be good for everybody to hear. We are not certain of what those lock-ins are yet. We don't
Mhm.
have them.
But that's good for us to hear. Is there a chance that an Austin Ridge student or a Mills Park student or a I don't know, pick it was West Cary, I think is out this way. Student might be suggested for an assignment change because of, as a domino to the opening of Morrisville. It is completely possible, sure. Is it guaranteed? No, right. We're just way too early. We're very, very early in the process. But having these kinds of questions are going to help us understand what's important to you as families. I will say, because Parkside Middle is not yet opening, any middle school changes that we would recommend would be, I will say, likely few because we know we still are going to have that big movement when Parkside Middle opens up. And we, again, mentioned this earlier, we certainly would not want to make a recommendation for 27, 28 that then has to be undone. We've heard that clearly. I know this area, particularly in that northwest section closer to the airport, that has been reassigned multiple times just because of how fast this region grew. We've learned from that, and we were really trying hard not to do that again, to reduce the total number of times that an area is impacted. We really want to think a lot, much more long term. So we'll be very conservative with any middle school or elementary adjustments. However, they may be needed to make sense, so that those cohort and those feeder patterns are aligned.
I'm gonna work to answer or ask this question a little bit differently than it's posed.
Okay.
Um, are you is it considered that certain schools wind up splitting kids into multiple different schools? And is there any work engaging to collapse that?
Yes, I think that's a further consideration of some of the comments we've made already tonight, which is we've heard loud and clear from communities all across the district that so there are some areas because of how rapidly they grew and because of how rapidly new schools came online that perhaps we created an attendance area for an elementary school and then didn't really necessarily think too much about what the middle school pattern would be for the kids at the school, or vice versa. We created a middle school attendance area but didn't really think about the elementary students coming in and then what high school they were going to. And so we have what I would describe as fragmented feeder patterns or fragmented cohorts. We're working really hard to take that into consideration that if we come into an area to do some reassignments, if we can make some adjustments that make those better, we certainly are trying to do that. But we also don't want to reassign students just to reassign students because remember, stability is one of those pillars too. So we want to impact the fewest students possible, yet create long term success, sort of long term areas that can remain stable for a long time. You're still muted, Eric.
Will a walking path be built for residents from Breckenridge to use?
I've heard this question quite a bit, and I think there's some sort of a greenway there. That is a little outside the scope of my part of that. That's more of like a planning side, but we're getting that question answered by the team. So keep an eye on the website for FAQs on that one. That one's come up quite a bit over the last couple of years. I can't say, I don't know, but
Yeah.
we will work on that and see if the planning team is able to answer that at this time. If not,
There's
they'll
a
certainly be able to
question
answer it by September.
there's a question about transportation provided for Morrisville that live in the Breckenridge community, but again, that depends on who's assigned, right?
Sure, and I think it's because Breckenridge is like next door to the campus. So it transportation zones are established by our transportation department in accordance with their policy. By state law, we're not required to provide bus service inside of, I think it's either a mile or a mile and a half, but oftentimes for safety reasons, we feel it's best to do so. So transportation can sometimes be provided for a neighborhood that's actually pretty close to a school if there's major, four lane highways that have to be crossed. There may be a crosswalk there, but you know, saying that it's okay for a kindergartner to cross four lanes of traffic on a 65-mile-an-hour highway just doesn't feel good to us as a district, as a way of an example. So I can't tell you yes or no if transportation will be provided, but I can say that transportation department will keep safety of students in mind when making those determinations. Keep in mind that just because transportation is provided doesn't mean you have to use it. So if you're a family that likes to, roll to school on a bike or a scooter or something like that, those types of things are usually still available. You would just work with the principal to determine which sidewalks are you supposed to be on and which crosswalks are you supposed to use and all of that. But yes, walking and rolling to school is something we definitely would like to encourage and support.
Would it make more sense to, for assignment purposes, to open Parkside Middle first, then Morrisville High School?
Physically, we just can't do that. Structurally, Parkside Middle hasn't even groundbreaking hasn't even begun. Morrisville High School will be ready to open in 27, 28, and that decision was made by our board and our facilities committee a couple of years ago to prioritize the opening of the school. I'll be candid. Panther Creek and Green Hope are significantly more crowded than, the one or two middle schools that happen to be capped. Thinking about all the trailers they've had to rely on for tens and tens of years. So the relief at the high school is just as important as it is at the middle school. Unfortunately, the way the bonding funds come in, you can't always open two schools at the same time in the same area. So I hear the question and I understand the question, but physically, it's just not possible.
Will Morrisville be traditional?
Our high schools are all traditional, with the exception of our early colleges, and I think the one Southeast Raleigh is on the modified. It's a magnet school, but yes, it'll be a traditional calendar school. That I can say with assurance. And I will say that because I know there's some people in the community that have gotten so accustomed to multi-track, they're like, "Oh, a multi-track high school." Our district just there's a lot of research, and I was in a district at one point that attempted to do that, and it just creates a lot of equity issues for programming. Students can't get access to certain courses. You've got students with extracurricular activities that can't make it to their scheduled events because they're tracked out, and also just trying to make sure that everybody has all the high quality programming available to all students. It's just so much better if all the students are on traditional calendar.
If Morrisville High School opens on schedule, will the student body have 4 grades or
So yeah, opening on schedule, it'll start with ninth and 10th grade. Then the year after that, though, those 10th graders will rise up and become 11th graders, and the school will have ninth, 10th, and 11th. And then in that third year of operations, they'll have that first group of seniors. So it'll take them 3 years to get to the point where they have all 4 grades. But yes, they will have all 4 grades eventually.
this is going to be difficult to answer.
Okay.
What percentage of the student body of the new high school do you anticipate will be pulled from Green Hope, Panther Creek,
Yeah.
Green Level?
Yep. No anticipation at this point in time. I would think Panther Creek and Green Hope, they're right there. I think they're likely candidates. Perhaps someone mentioned earlier the northwestern edge of Cary High might be, a candidate. I'm not sure off the top of my head if Leesville High School still has a little arm that dips down into this region. For those of you who haven't been here that long, originally this entire area was served by Leesville High School before Panther Creek and Green Hope opened up. So any that type of stuff we would work to consolidate, and certainly focusing on the area around the school and relieving the crowding at the schools nearby. But percentage wise, it's September would be when we could answer those types of questions.
What will be the capacity of Morrisville High School?
At full capacity right now, we're being told it'll be something in the realm of 1,800, give or take, whatever it is once the final capacity calculations are done. So that means in the first school year, it will serve up to 900 students, and then just keep adding from there until you get to the 1,800 at all 4 years, all 4 grades. You haven't asked me a single question about academics, Eric. I know there's got to be one in there.
Well, since you mentioned it, I heard that Morrisville High School has a pre-college. How do we know when my child can apply to it?
Okay. So because of where Morrisville High School is located, and because a portion of the building is actually complete, because the way they phase the construction, the Wake Early College of Information and Biotechnology, which is a standalone magnet school, is hanging out in that area. It's called Swing Space. They're just using those classrooms right now while they wait for their building to complete construction, because they're going to permanently be sited at the Parkside Middle location. There's a whole wing that's going to be built on that campus specifically for the early college, and it's under planning and all of that. And when that construction's complete, they'll leave Morrisville High School and go there. So it is a magnet program. That's one of our standalone early college magnet programs. And those you can apply for during the normal magnet lottery period. So this October, Eric, I don't know the date. It's usually the middle of October. The application window will open and you would put those applications in. So that school is already open and running, but it is not Morrisville High School. It's not a part of Morrisville High School. It's just hanging out, like renting space, if you will, since that portion of the campus is already complete. But they will only be there temporarily.
For a student who receives a stability transfer, is bus transportation still available?
No, unfortunately, it is not. That's one way we got the compromise through with the board, is to say that we'll allow more students to be able to have the stability transfers, But in order to make that concession, we have to take the transportation away and push that towards the new school for the families that are going to the new school. So no, stability transfers do not come with transportation. However, if you've got enough families that are doing it, I've heard of a lot of success of carpooling and caravanning, or carpooling and that kind of stuff. So a lot of times you can work with a network. I'm going to just pause here too, because the stability transfer happens in December. If you're not quite sure, go ahead and ask for the stability transfer, get that stability transfer in hand. And then by the time you get to sort of this time of year, March, when our transfer window opens up, if you're like, oof, we're not going to be able to make transportation work, or oh my goodness, their entire friend group decided to go to the new school, you can always put in a back to base transfer in that March official hardship transfer period, and we would approve that, except for the cap schools. But like if you wanted to put in a back to base to go to Morrisville High School, we would certainly approve those in March. So it's better to go ahead and get the stability transfer in December if you're impacted by the reassignment plan, and then give it up, let's say, in March, than to try to do it the other way around.
Do you anticipate eventually changing the multi-track year-round calendar to traditional for any of the elementary schools that you showed?
Sure. So I think we mentioned there is an ongoing discussion with our board right now for facility utilization. Oh, where's that step? Here, right? This is an ongoing conversation that we're having with the board as the tail end of 26, 27 about some elementary schools, specifically in this region. There's a couple that are more on the Leesville side. Briar Creek and Sycamore Creek Elementary are being evaluated. On this sort of side of the map, we're looking at Pleasant Grove, Carpenter, and Morrisville elementaries. That's a whole different feedback process. We've received quite a bit of feedback in this area. And as somebody mentioned, I think earlier, about the crowding, you can see there's still some growth coming here, and there's still some growth coming here. So the question is it just a little too soon to make them traditional or single track? Perhaps maybe we could expand their attendance areas. So there's a lot to be discussed around this. I would encourage anyone who's keenly interested in this to tune into the facilities committee meeting on April 14th, because we'll be giving initial recommendations to the board on this particular topic, and then continuing those conversations beyond that. They're not expected to make a final decision until closer to May 19th. But that's a whole separate dialogue. But what those decisions are will impact potentially what we do with the enrollment plan.
Will Morrisville High School have student parking?
Yes. In fact, I believe they're building a parking garage. So yes. And I will say, this is the one thing I learned with Felton Grove. I was talking to the principal down there, and he said, keep in mind that if you're a sophomore who gets a driver's license in the first or second year, you'll have a parking space because you're the only ones driving. There's no juniors or seniors taking priority spots away. So there's a tiny little advantage there about being a sophomore at a brand new school, is that there's going to be plenty of parking available those first couple of years until they get a full group of seniors and juniors on campus. So there's a chance you could park from the moment you get your driver's license on.
How
It's a small
will
benefit, but it's a
staffing?
benefit.
Yeah. How will staffing at Morrisville High be compared to these other schools?
Sure. So it'll be appropriate to the total numbers they serve, right? So I think I hope everyone kind of sort of understands there's like formulas that we use at the state and county level. X number of students equals a teacher kind of situation. So based on all the total number of 9th and 10th graders that are assigned to and attending the school, once all the stability transfers for the sibling type groups are approved, the principal will then know how many students they're working to serve. In addition, they'll get a little bit of extra help those first couple of years, just because opening a new school is different. They'll get a couple of extra supports there to help open the school. And then once the principal is named, I will say this, the principal is usually named either around late November, early December, so that they can actually start working in January. That is something our district has changed over the last couple of years, to get that person in place a little bit earlier. It used to be closer to March or April. So that way the principal will be able to start doing planning work for the school, start setting up meetings with parents and families. In this case, they might even, depending on how the construction schedule works out, be able to start even giving tours. It all depends on the timing of that. but they can start, having information sessions, sending out um, orientation type, invitations, and start hiring their staff. Uh, what they'll be allowed to do if they're a principal from one of our existing schools, they'll have a certain percentage of staff that they're allowed to bring with them from their school if they'd like. Not too many, but enough to have like a good, strong base. And then they'll hire from the same applicant pool that everyone else does in the district using the transfer portal where teachers, move around for schools within the district or new, employees coming in from either brand new to the district or brand new to the teaching career. So they'll always have a nice mixture of veteran teachers as well as new teachers in the building to get the school started. So that's a benefit that our board has made sure that our principals can have. And then they'll have all the subjects that the students need. I can't tell you which clubs will be there. And talking with the principals that have opened new schools, it's really student driven, right? So if enough students come together and say, we want this club, great, we'll do that. Athletics, we've talked with our athletic director in central office, and there will be varsity sports for any sport that they can field, right? So as long as there's enough students to get on the team, they'll have a varsity sport. The only exception is football. Football will start with junior varsity and will grow into having a varsity program. And then if there's enough interest in a particular sport, they could have both varsity and junior varsity, which means you could have a 9th grader that does varsity all 4 years, or a 10th grader that does varsity for those 3 years. So all of that's going to just depend on student interest, but all sports will be available. All teams can be created as long as there's enough student interest to fill the teams. When it comes to things like band and chorus and all of that, yes, they'll have all the normal comprehensive high school courses, and just the size of those programs will just be kind of small to begin with, and they'll grow over time. So all of those types of programs will be available. Special electives like dance or something like that will just be dependent on student signups. And then, Eric, there's usually a career technical education set of courses that are kind of assigned to the school, if you will. And so those will also be available starting in the first year of operation.
But will there be band?
Yes.
Okay, so we won't have to bus kids to Panther Creek.
No.
I don't think we do that anyway.
I think what they're concerned about potentially is because of the location of the school and the land restrictions, some of the athletic fields will be off-site, but the football field will be on-site. But there, and I'm going to speak out of turn, so I'll stop there. We'll get some more questions and we'll put them on the website because the facilities team can help us better explain that. But some sports will be played at alternate locations, but they'll have shuttles kind of to take them back and forth to those.
We have answered questions about clubs.
Okay.
There seems to be a small revolt about the mascot.
We will share that with whoever it is that makes those decisions, because it's not us. And we will share that information with that. It's probably the athletic department, I'm assuming. But I'm not actually sure.
That has almost as many questions populated to it as can I have my rising 9th grader attend with my rising 12th grader?
Yeah.
So,
okay. And I mean, it's important, right, Ed?
Yeah.
I think as a district, we moved away from letting the first class pick it because we have so many high schools and then we're getting redundancies and such. But we will share those concerns to determine if it's how far down the road the selection is. And we'll let them respond to that part because we really actually have no say on that. But we will definitely be a conduit for you and get that information to the appropriate parties.
How will continuity of curriculum, course trajectory, and progression be ensured if a student is reassigned to Morrisville High School as a 10th grader?
Thank you for asking that. That's why we stop at 10th grade, because at 10th grade, we can do it. At 10th grade, we can know what the students' academic needs are, and we can prepare all of the courses that they need to be able to continue on the path that they originally set up for themselves. When you get to 11th and 12th grade, it gets really difficult to truly offer that kind of continuity. I will say you'll just work really closely with the school counselors. The principal's going to look at all of those interest forms from students and then build the best course schedule that they possibly can. to support all the needs of the students.
Will all electives and extracurriculars be offered at Morrisville when it opens, even though it opens only with ninth and 10th? So all is a big,
Hmm.
and I think there's a lot to unpack right there.
Yeah. So all isn't true school to school. However you're going to define all, right? Um, what I have learned is it's based on the student interest. So if there's student interest for a subject and the students are signing up for that particular elective, then that elective will be able to make it. So they're going to take, which is I think kind of cool. It's based on what the students are asking for, what the students are signing up for, what they're registering for. It's not this, here's the classes we're going to offer and you have to take them. So the student interest is going to be a huge driver of the electives, other than the standard like required electives. We'll have foreign language, we'll have some sort of music, we'll have some sort of health and PE and those types of electives that are required by graduation standards. But the rest of the electives will be largely driven by student interest, and 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 that'll be kind of a cool thing because then the students won't necessarily be stuck in electives that they don't want because it'll be driven by what they sign up for. That now this perfect world, every kid has to take at least one elective that they don't like, right? That's always going to happen. That's just part of being in high school. But um, they're not going to be this pre-slugged set of electives and then say, students, these are the ones you can take.
Do we know about chorus and orchestra?
Orchestra is a tough one. I don't know about that. We'll have to push that one up the pipeline to see because I'm not sure what it takes to start an orchestra program or if orchestra is at the comprehensive high schools because I know for sure it's at our magnet schools.
There aren't
So
many.
we'll push that one up to the right departments and get an answer to that question. Band, yes. Some type of music, yes. I just don't know what the top end of that would look like or what it would take to get to a point where you could have an orchestra. Those are just outside our domain, but we'll get that answer for you.
What about AP?
So AP coursework again will be appropriate to the student's level. So I would imagine there's going to be limited access for 10th graders because it's just not a grade where you have a ton of AP course offerings, but whatever's appropriate for 10th grade students, I'm sure those would be available. And then the rest would just build as the students sign up for them. In like that
And
11th
certainly
grade year. That
demand
12th
at
grade
the
year.
school
Yeah, demand at the school. But
determines.
that gets back to the students signing up for the course and being, academically ready and all of that. So if you've got a big cohort that's ready for a certain number of AP courses as sophomores, they'll be there. And these are the kinds of questions I would really encourage you to keep in your back pocket for that September open house because we're going to have a couple of veteran principals who've opened schools available and they can really tell you like the practicality of how all of that works.
All right, we have answered the AP question as best we are able at the moment. Sports teams. Can you review the athletic facilities on site?
I
What's
really can't. But we'll get that. We'll get that for this community and we'll get it cross-linked to our website so they don't have to go digging for it. It's in the facilities website somewhere, like the design drawings are there, but we'll get it and we'll link it directly from our site so people don't have to go digging for it.
Okay. Sports beat out both sets of questions on the 9th and 12th rising and
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
If there are not enough students to field a particular team at the new high school, can students participate on that team at another high school?
Ooh, that's a very nuanced question. We're going to have to ask somebody else that. We will find that out for you.
Do we know the time? Will it be the same as other high schools or
Oh, the bell
will
schedule.
it have a different bell schedule?
So bell schedules are determined later in the process. Usually our transportation department gets involved because they have to figure out the bus routing for the school. So the bell schedule itself probably won't be known until closer to Actually, I don't even know. Probably closer to the spring, the year before it opens. I would say it's likely that they would try to have it on a similar tier to high schools in the region, but I don't want to overstep. But we'll get you some more specific timing on when that'll be known. But it is largely contingent on the routing for the buses to the school.
Where do we find the administration link to Morrisville High School?
There isn't one. I'm not sure that I understand the question. Like, no administrator's been, there's not a principal yet or anything. That won't be identified until later, probably December-ish timeframe. The high school webpage itself won't go live until that principal is named and is able to start putting some information together to, get proper information out to parents. And there's like a phone number you can call, and they have a secretary that can answer the phone, and they have an email address and all of that. So that type of information won't be available probably till sometime February-ish. But if you're asking about like the project, there is project information on the facilities page, and we can start linking that to our information so people can look at just the project updates and the project status. There is, like I said, there's a school that's borrowing the site, but that is not going to be the principal of Morrisville. Well, I can't say she's not going to apply, but she's the principal of the Wake Early College of Information and Biotechnology. So she will not be a person that you could ask questions about Morrisville High School to, because that's not her school. She's just renting the space, if you will. So right now, the best thing is to kind of funnel your questions to us, and then we'll push them out to academics or athletics or, arts education, and we'll get those answers and we'll bring them back together for you on our assignment planning page. Because right now there's not a staff for Morrisville High School just yet.
Will my student be able to take Wake dual enrollment courses or online Wake Tech courses?
So I'm going to presume this means like the college and career promise process. And if that's what they're referring to, that's available in all of our high schools in the entire district once the students are academically and whatever it is, eligible to participate in the process. So yes, the college and career promise courses will be available to students at Morrisville High, just like they are at all the rest of the schools in the district. I'm seeing we're at 7:27, Eric. Do we have any new or different questions we haven't addressed yet?
I'm looking for new or different, and if we live less than a mile from Panther Creek, is there still a possibility we'd get reassigned to Morrisville?
I think it would be a less likely possibility, but I don't ever want to say zero, right? Because you just never know what's going to happen when all of the lines start getting drawn and the boundaries start getting assessed. But I would say the closer you are physically to your current high school, the less likely you would be considered for a reassignment to the new one, as a general rule of thumb.
All right, let's see where else we are. Someone else will likely have to answer this,
Okay.
but given that Morrisville will only have 9th and 10th in the beginning, band program will be smaller. Are other high schools in the area set up by grade for their band programs?
Ooh, yeah, yeah, let's get to the arts education department and help them answer that one for us. Thank you for bringing that forward. Well, yeah.
Definitely not in our wheelhouse.
No.
One of the questions is, how do we ask questions? And please use the thought exchange. Please use the features that we have provided for you to be able to do that.
Yeah. What we do is we've had an in-person session, actually two of them, because we had one last year and one this year. So we've captured a lot of those questions and we use those to populate some information last year. We have not updated the FAQ portion of our assignment planning page just yet because we're still in this, information gathering phase, but we'll be doing that soon. Like I said, this time of year, it'll be sort of once a month just because of how long it takes us to dig through all these questions and get answers from other departments and make sure we get you accurate information. Once we get to September, we'll be updating it every week or 2 weeks just because of how fast we're moving through the process at that point in time. The thought exchange is also a great place to ask questions because, number one, we can see the energy in the community around that particular question. Your board members can see it in addition to the planning team. So that's why it's a great tool because it's full transparency, fully open. Your board members can dig through it. I've had board members read comments and questions from the thought exchange out loud at the board table, right? So it's that accessible for them. And then the planning team can use them and do all the analysis on input, but also find those and tease out those unique and special questions so that we can make sure that we're getting those answered for you. So we just continue to ask that you go to the frequently asked questions section of the assignment planning page. Probably starting like next week or the week after, we'll start getting those updated, particularly related to Morrisville High School. Eric, I think I'm going to turn things back over to you.
Well, thank you, everyone. We hope that the session has been informative and that you better understand the overall enrollment planning process. Separately, we appreciate your open and honest participation. Your input and feedback is vital in informing the development of our next enrollment plan. Remember, we will present a summary of the feedback received to the board during a work session in June. The thought exchange will remain open through April 30th, and we encourage you to continue to post comments, rate comments, and explore the exchange over the next few months. Again, thank you, and we hope you enjoy the remainder of your evening. Have a good night, everyone.